Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Empires Historical. You are about to embark on a journey through the heart of one of the most enigmatic and powerful empires the world has ever seen. A civilization that once thrived at the center of what is now modern-day Mexico, whose rise to dominance and eventual fall continues to echo through history. The Aztec Empire, built on conquest, sacrifice, and the belief in gods who ruled over the natural world with an iron fist. But what exactly makes the Aztecs so intriguing? Why are they still discussed with awe and mystery centuries after their downfall? Imagine a city of unimaginable wealth, its streets filled with bustling marketplaces, sacred rituals, and towering pyramids, all set on an island in the middle of a lake. The inhabitants believed that their survival, their very existence, was inextricably linked to the favor of gods who demanded the ultimate price: human sacrifice. Tenochtitlan, an island city that rose from the depths of a lake and became the heart of an empire, was not just a place of worship. It was a grand political and military center. It was a symbol of power, a testament to human ingenuity and ambition. But it was also a city haunted by its own beliefs, by its need to appease the gods, and by the dark rituals that could not be avoided. The Aztecs were not simply warriors. They were also thinkers, artists, and architects who designed their world with precision and purpose. Their calendar was not just a measure of time, but a religious system. Their temples were not merely buildings. They were cosmic symbols connecting the heavens to the earth. Their military was not just an army. It was an instrument of divine will, used to capture prisoners for rituals that shocked the world. And yet, despite all their might, their empire would crumble under the weight of their beliefs when confronted with foreign invaders. But what led to their rise? What dark secrets did the gods demand from them? And what brought about their tragic fall? This is the story of the Aztec Empire, a civilization that thrived in the heart of Mesoamerica before it was consumed by the arrival of the Spanish conquistadors. But the story doesn't end there. The impact of the Aztecs is still felt today in the culture, the language, and even the spiritual practices of modern Mexico. What lessons can we draw from this incredible civilization, whose complex system of government, religion, and warfare was as advanced as it was terrifying? So, sit back and prepare to journey into a world of mystery, grandeur, and unimaginable tragedy. You'll discover the rise of the Aztecs, their divine visions, their brutal rituals, and the relentless drive for power that ultimately led them to clash with the Spanish. What happened when their gods, who once guided them to greatness, seemed to turn their back on them in their darkest hour? Was it fate or divine retribution that caused their empire to collapse? Before we dive deep into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Your support keeps Empires Historical alive, bringing you more thrilling explorations into the most fascinating empires and histories the world has ever known. Stay with us as we unravel the mysterious Aztec Empire, a civilization that still holds secrets to this day. Now, let's go back in time and witness the breathtaking rise of the Aztec Empire, a journey into the heart of one of the most powerful and controversial empires in human history. The Aztec Empire is a name that evokes images of soaring pyramids, fierce warriors, and religious practices that shocked the world. Yet, beneath this dramatic surface, the Aztecs were a complex civilization whose rise and fall still captivate historians and scholars. The very nature of their civilization, its complex system of religion, governance, and society, was forged by the gods themselves, and it was these gods who would ultimately bring about their destruction. At its peak, the Aztec Empire controlled vast territories in Mesoamerica, with Tenochtitlan as its beating heart, a city built on an island in the middle of Lake Texcoco. Tenochtitlan was a marvel of engineering, its canals and causeways serving as vital arteries in the bustling capital. The city was home to over 200,000 people, making it one of the largest urban centers in the world at the time. The Aztecs, also known as the Mexica, created an empire that was both a military powerhouse and a religious state, with every aspect of life intertwined with their gods and the need to sustain their favor. But what was it that drove this civilization to such extremes? Was it their unyielding belief in their gods? Was it their ambition to expand their empire, to impose their rule over other nations? Or was it something darker, the need to appease their gods, who demanded nothing less than human blood to ensure the continued cycle of life and death? The truth lies somewhere in the complex interplay between their religious practices, military conquests, and social structure. The Aztecs believed that the world was in a constant state of flux, and that the gods were the ultimate architects of this chaos. To them, the gods required offerings to maintain cosmic balance, offerings that, for the Aztecs, took the form of human sacrifices. These sacrifices were not just about appeasing gods, but were deeply woven into the fabric of Aztec society. They were used to cement political power, to control the masses, and to assert the empire's dominance over its enemies. The most significant of these rituals occurred at the Templo Mayor in Tenochtitlan, a massive pyramid dedicated to the gods Huitzilopochtli, the god of war, and Tlaloc, the god of rain. Here, prisoners of war were ritually sacrificed in a dramatic display that symbolized the Aztec commitment to their divine mission. But the Aztec Empire was not just a society of war and sacrifice. It was a civilization that valued art, astronomy, and architecture. The Aztecs had a sophisticated understanding of the stars and the cosmos, using their observations to create an intricate calendar system. They built towering pyramids and temples, which were not only religious centers but also symbols of their power. Their marketplaces were filled with exotic goods, feathers, jade, cacao, and precious stones. The Aztecs had mastered the art of agriculture, using chinampas, man-made floating gardens, to feed their ever-growing population. Their society was structured with a rigid hierarchy, from the nobility at the top to the slaves at the bottom. Yet there was always a place for merit. Those who excelled in battle or service could rise to positions of power. Yet beneath this image of grandeur and sophistication, the Aztec Empire was built on violence and conquest. The empire was born from the ashes of war, and its very foundation was a series of military conquests that stretched across Mesoamerica. To the Aztecs, war was sacred. It was not just a means to acquire land and wealth, but a ritual act demanded by the gods. Warriors who captured prisoners for sacrifice were revered, and their skill in battle was a reflection of their devotion to the gods. The more prisoners they captured, the more honor they earned, and the higher their status in society. But no empire is immune to collapse. The Aztecs, for all their power and wealth, faced an enemy they could not defeat: the arrival of the Spanish conquistadors. In 1519, Hernán Cortés and his small army of conquistadors arrived on the coast of Mexico, seeking fortune and glory. They were met with the awe and reverence of the Aztecs, who believed that these pale-skinned strangers might be the returning gods, foretold by prophecy. But the arrival of the Spanish would be the beginning of the end for the Aztec Empire. With their superior weapons, horses, and tactics, the Spanish quickly defeated the Aztec forces, and in 1521, Tenochtitlan fell. The fall of the Aztec Empire was not just a military defeat, it was the end of an era. The Aztecs had believed that their gods had guided them to greatness, but in the end, it was the gods who abandoned them. The Spanish brought with them not just steel and gunpowder, but also disease, which decimated the Aztec population and left the empire vulnerable. The gods who had once given the Aztecs power now seemed to turn their backs on them in their most desperate hour. But the story of the Aztec Empire does not end with its fall. The legacy of the Aztecs endures, particularly in Mexico, where their cultural influence is still felt today. From their language, Nahuatl, to their art, architecture, and even their spiritual practices, the Aztecs left an indelible mark on the world. Their story serves as a reminder of the power of belief, the cost of ambition, and the fragility of even the greatest of empires. So, as we explore the rise and fall of the Aztec Empire, remember that their legacy is not just one of blood and sacrifice, it is a story of human ambition, ingenuity, and resilience. A story that continues to fascinate and inspire to this day. Don't forget to subscribe to Empire's Historical for more stories of the world's greatest civilizations, their triumphs, and their tragedies. Your support ensures we can continue bringing these incredible stories to life. The heart of any empire lies in its ability to sustain itself, and for the Aztecs, this meant a deep understanding of the land they had conquered. The Aztec Empire, with its intricate social structures and complex religious systems, might have been formidable in warfare and impressive in its rituals, but its true strength began with its economy, an economy firmly rooted in agriculture. The farmers, merchants, and craftsmen of the empire were the unsung heroes who ensured its prosperity and survival. The Aztec agricultural system was nothing short of revolutionary, and it served as the backbone of their flourishing society. This was an empire born of blood and sacrifice, but it was also an empire that depended on the very earth beneath its feet. At the center of Aztec agriculture was the Chinampa system, a method that transformed the lakes around Tenochtitlan into fertile grounds for cultivation. The Aztecs had the extraordinary ability to turn swampy land into productive farmland, creating what are now called floating gardens. These chinampas were not just a form of agricultural innovation. They were a symbol of the Aztecs' deep connection to nature and their belief that their prosperity was interwoven with the natural world. The creation of these artificial islands was a feat of engineering, an example of human ingenuity that defied the challenges of the environment. These chinampas were built by piling mud and vegetation onto the lakebed, then reinforcing them with stakes and reeds. Over time, these islands grew into thriving, highly productive farms where crops like maize, beans, squash, and tomatoes flourished. The Chinampa system allowed the Aztecs to achieve agricultural yields that were unmatched by their contemporaries. The productivity of the Chinampas was one of the key factors that helped support the massive population of Tenochtitlan, which was among the largest cities in the world at the time. These floating gardens were so fertile that they could produce multiple harvests in a year, an ability that gave the Aztec Empire a stability that many other societies could only dream of. The importance of chinampas went beyond just food production. They were a vital part of the Aztec way of life, providing both sustenance and a symbol of their relationship with the gods. In addition to the chinampas, the Aztecs were skilled in terrace farming, another ingenious technique they employed to make use of the mountainous terrain in other parts of their empire. By carving terraces into the steep hillsides, the Aztecs were able to grow crops in regions that might otherwise have been unsuitable for agriculture. These terraces, supported by stone walls, retained soil and moisture, preventing erosion and ensuring a steady supply of food even in the highlands. It was yet another example of the Aztecs' resourcefulness in managing the land they controlled. But the economy of the Aztec Empire was not solely dependent on agriculture. The Aztecs were also keen traders, and their empire was a hub of commerce that spanned the vast expanse of Mesoamerica. The markets of Tenochtitlan were legendary for their scale, diversity, and vibrancy. The largest of these markets, Tlatelolco, was said to have hosted thousands of traders from every corner of the empire. Here, merchants could find goods that ranged from the mundane to the exotic, everything from cotton textiles, pottery, and foodstuffs to jade, gold, feathers, and even exotic animals like jaguars and macaws. The market was not just a place of trade, it was a vital part of the Aztec economy, a place where the exchange of goods symbolized the interconnectedness of the empire. The Aztecs used a system of tribute to collect resources from the regions they controlled. These tributes came in many forms: agricultural products, textiles, luxury items, and even human labor. Tribute was collected from the various city-states and regions that made up the empire, and it was distributed to the emperor and his nobles. The tribute system was both a means of wealth extraction and a method of maintaining control over the empire's far-reaching territories. Each province had its own specific tribute requirements, and the failure to meet these obligations could result in military retaliation. The Aztecs used tribute as both a form of economic control and as a way to ensure that they maintained dominance over the diverse peoples they had conquered. In the world of the Aztecs, merchants, or pochteca, held a special place. These were the individuals who acted as the lifeblood of the economy, traveling vast distances to trade goods. The Pochteca were not just merchants. They were also spies, diplomats, and sometimes even warriors. Their long journeys across Mesoamerica allowed them to gather intelligence about other civilizations, track trade routes, and bring back valuable resources. In many ways, they were the eyes and ears of the Aztec government, and their role in the empire was vital to its expansion and success. For their services, Pochteca were often rewarded with great wealth and status. The goods that passed through the markets and trade routes were not merely commodities. They were symbols of Aztec wealth and power. Cacao beans, for example, were not only a staple of the Aztec diet, but also served as currency. They were highly prized, and the elite drank a frothy, bitter chocolate beverage made from them. The Aztecs also prized precious metals like gold and silver, which were used to create elaborate jewelry and religious offerings. The value of these materials went beyond their material worth. They represented the divine favor that the Aztecs believed they had earned through their devotion to the gods. Luxury goods were also central to the Aztec economy. Exotic feathers, especially those from the quetzal bird, were highly sought after and used to create elaborate headdresses, cloaks, and ceremonial garments. Jade, a green gemstone, was another prized material used in jewelry, religious idols, and ceremonial tools. These luxury goods were not only symbols of wealth but also important in religious rituals. They were used in offerings to the gods, and they played a significant role in the sacred ceremonies that reinforced the power and legitimacy of the Aztec rulers. While the Aztecs were adept at managing the resources of their empire, they also understood the importance of social order and labor. The economy was highly stratified, with the nobility, priests, and warriors at the top, and farmers, laborers, and slaves at the bottom. The majority of Aztec society consisted of peasants who worked the land and produced the food that fed the empire. These peasants were often tied to the land they worked, and their labor was considered essential to the functioning of the economy. In return for their hard work, they were granted protection and access to the resources needed for survival. Slavery, too, was a part of the Aztec economy. Slaves were often prisoners of war or individuals who had fallen into debt, and they played a crucial role in the labor force. They worked in households, on farms, and in the construction of temples and other public works. While slavery in the Aztec world was not as absolute as it would later become in other parts of the world, it was still an important part of the economic structure. The Aztec economy, then, was a complex system that depended on both agriculture and commerce, with a deeply ingrained social structure that dictated the roles of different individuals. The economy was built on a foundation of agricultural innovation, the tribute system, and trade, all of which ensured the survival and prosperity of the Aztec Empire. But it was also a system that was maintained by the labor of the masses, who worked tirelessly to support the empire's grand ambitions. The Aztecs were not only warriors and priests, they were farmers, traders, and craftsmen who built an economy that allowed them to thrive in a world of constant competition and danger. The ingenuity of their agricultural practices, the vibrancy of their markets, and the wealth generated by their tribute system were the cornerstones of their empire. But, as with any great empire, the forces that allowed the Aztecs to rise to power were the same forces that would eventually contribute to their downfall. The vast wealth generated by their economy made them a target for foreign invaders, and the tribute system that helped sustain the empire became a burden as it was exploited by the Spanish. The Aztec economy, for all its complexity and brilliance, would not be enough to prevent the collapse of the empire when the forces of history came crashing down. Yet even in their fall, the Aztecs left a lasting legacy. Their agricultural innovations, their trading networks, and their understanding of the land remain a testament to the ingenuity and determination of a people who built one of the most extraordinary empires the world has ever seen. Today, their legacy continues to influence modern-day Mexico, where the descendants of the Aztecs still live and work, maintaining the traditions and customs passed down through generations. In the end, the economy of the Aztec Empire was not just about wealth or resources. It was a reflection of the people who built it, resourceful, determined, and deeply connected to the earth. And while the empire itself may have fallen, The lessons learned from their agricultural innovations and economic systems continue to shape the world we live in today. The Aztec Empire, towering and terrifying, was not only a marvel of engineering and agricultural ingenuity, but also a formidable military machine that drove its expansion and ensured its dominance over the Mesoamerican landscape. At the heart of its strength was an intricate and highly disciplined military organization, one built on both ancient traditions and the unique requirements of the Aztec state. From its elite warrior classes to the implementation of military strategies that were both brutal and effective, the Aztec military was one of the most powerful and feared forces in the ancient world. However, beyond the well-crafted weapons and well-trained soldiers, it was the soul of the Aztec warrior, their devotion to their gods and their culture, that truly set them apart and defined the Aztec approach to warfare. The Aztec military was divided into various classes and hierarchies, with each level contributing in distinct ways to the empire's military successes. At the core of the Aztec army were the Tlaxcatecatl, the war leaders who were responsible for commanding the armies during campaigns. These were highly skilled warriors, and their roles carried immense respect and authority. Beneath them were the Cuautli, eagle warriors, who formed the elite ranks of the military. These men had earned their status through exceptional bravery in battle, often by capturing prisoners to be sacrificed. The Aztec military was deeply interwoven with the religious framework of their society, where capturing prisoners for ritual sacrifice was not only a matter of politics, but of divine favor. It was through this sacred practice that warriors were able to elevate their prestige, and thus the military's successes became intertwined with Aztec spirituality. Every warrior in the Aztec army had a significant role to play. As the empire expanded, the Aztec military adapted and incorporated soldiers from various tribes and city-states they conquered. While this brought diversity to the ranks, it also reinforced the belief that the Aztec state was superior, an ideology that spread both through force and diplomacy. The ultimate aim of Aztec military endeavors was to control as many tribute-producing provinces as possible. While the empire's reach grew, the Aztecs were not content with mere conquest. They sought to extract tribute, demand military service, and maintain influence over the subjugated peoples. One of the greatest strengths of the Aztec military was its ability to mobilize soldiers quickly. The empire's vast reach was supported by an efficient system of conscription. The military itself was organized around a rotating structure where every capable man was called to arms when necessary, especially in times of war. As a result, the Aztecs could muster vast numbers of soldiers from a wide range of regions, all trained to fight in battle with ferocity. However, the success of the military was not determined by sheer numbers alone. It was their military tactics and their unwavering discipline that gave them the advantage over many of their enemies. Tactics played a key role in Aztec warfare, and the military had evolved highly effective strategies that enabled them to overcome larger or better-equipped armies. In particular, the Aztecs were experts in guerrilla warfare, ambushes, and the siege. Their tactics were designed to maximize their intimate knowledge of the terrain and their ability to use it to their advantage. One of their most effective strategies was the use of war canoes. These small, swift vessels were instrumental in capturing key cities and strongholds, especially around the lakes of the Valley of Mexico. These war canoes gave the Aztecs unparalleled mobility, enabling them to launch surprise attacks on unwitting enemy forces. The importance of water in Aztec warfare cannot be overstated. Controlling the lakes of their region was tantamount to controlling the empire itself. The soldiers, known as Cuautli, eagle warriors, Ocolotl, jaguar warriors, and Mazatl, deer warriors, were trained from a young age to prepare for battle. Aztec youth attended military schools called Telpochcali and Calmecac, where they were taught combat, discipline, and survival techniques, with a heavy focus on both physical and mental endurance. A key element of training was the learning of discipline, loyalty to the state, and deep respect for the gods, who, in the eyes of the Aztecs, directly influenced the outcome of battles. Warfare was not just a military operation, it was a form of divine service. The warrior ethos, therefore, held religious significance and served as a medium through which the Aztecs honored their gods and ensured their survival as a state. War was an institution built around human sacrifice, which had its roots deep within Aztec culture. For the Aztecs, war was not simply a matter of conquest, but a religious act that satisfied the gods. The warriors' victories were measured not just by the amount of territory they conquered or wealth they amassed, but by the number of captives they took to be sacrificed. Human sacrifice was a central part of Aztec ritual, with warriors believing that their captives' hearts would nourish the sun god Huitzilopochtli and thus guarantee the continued flow of energy and life. This was not a barbaric or cruel practice for the Aztecs. Rather, it was an act of utmost devotion, representing their belief in the cyclical nature of life and death. War, therefore, was sacred. The ability to capture prisoners was as much a measure of one's honor as any other battlefield victory. The armor and weaponry used by the Aztec military were as symbolic as they were functional. The soldiers wore armor made from cotton and leather, reinforced with wood and obsidian, which provided them with a measure of protection against the weapons used by their enemies. However, their primary weapons were the maquahuitl, a type of obsidian-edged sword that could deliver devastating cuts, and the atlatl, a throwing spear that allowed Aztec warriors to strike enemies from a distance. These weapons, while formidable, were not as technologically advanced as those of the Spanish invaders, but it was the strategy, discipline, and unwavering bravery of the Aztec warriors that allowed them to dominate vast swathes of Mesoamerica. Another remarkable aspect of the Aztec military was its sense of honor. The elite Cuautli warriors, who were considered the best of the best, were selected based on their achievements in battle, primarily the number of captives they had taken. These warriors had the highest social standing in Aztec society, a status that granted them privileges in both military campaigns and daily life. Their success in capturing prisoners was not just a personal achievement, it was considered a service to the gods and the empire. As a result, warriors were highly esteemed, with the greatest reward being the honor of serving as the captain in battle, leading their troops to victories that would later be celebrated in religious ceremonies and festivals. The Aztecs' military prowess was also closely tied to their political power. The military was a tool of political control, used not only to expand the empire, but also to maintain order and loyalty within the empire's vast network of tributary states. The capture of new territory often led to the establishment of new alliances, and sometimes the dissolution of old ones through force or diplomacy. Military victories were often followed by lavish ceremonies, where tribute from the conquered peoples was paraded and sacrifices were made to solidify the military's triumphs and reinforce the empire's divine right to rule. Aztec warfare, with its devastating impact on their enemies, its sacred underpinnings, and its innovative tactics, was both a weapon and a tool of the gods. It ensured the empire's survival and prosperity, but despite their strength, the Aztecs were ultimately vulnerable. Their military structure, while deeply effective, was not equipped to face the technology and tactics of the Spanish invaders. The conquest of the Aztec Empire by the Spanish, driven by superior weaponry, horses, and disease, highlighted the limits of even the most powerful and well-organized military forces. But for all its eventual defeat, the military legacy of the Aztecs remains a testament to the empire's ingenuity, discipline, and cultural devotion. In the end, the Aztec military was more than just an army. It was an extension of the empire's spiritual and political ideals, a force that shaped not only the physical world around it, but also the very cultural fabric of the Aztec people. The Aztec warriors, fueled by a fierce devotion to their gods and their people, created an empire that stood as one of the greatest military powers in the ancient world. Their victories, sacrifices, and bravery forged the foundation for a civilization that still captivates the imagination of the world today, long after its fall. And though their empire may have been destroyed, the spirit of their warriors lives on in the legacy they left behind. The Aztec Empire, with its powerful military forces and advanced infrastructure, was a civilization that thrived on an exceptional political organization that spanned vast regions and involved an intricate balance of power. Unlike many empires of the ancient world, The Aztec government was not solely driven by kings or emperors, but by a carefully constructed framework that balanced military, religious, and social factors with an emphasis on the common good and the divine order. At its core, the political structure of the Aztec Empire was an extraordinary mix of monarchy, theocracy, and an expansive bureaucracy that allowed the Aztecs to manage one of the largest and most sophisticated empires in Mesoamerica. The system was led by the Tlatoani, the supreme ruler of the Aztec people, who held absolute power. Yet his rule was not isolated. The Tlatoani was regarded as the earthly representative of the gods, and was thus an object of immense reverence. The position was not hereditary, but rather elected by a council of nobles called the Tlaxcali from among the royal lineage. The selection process was a blend of tradition, politics, and divine guidance, wherein potential candidates were evaluated based on their skills as warriors, their political acumen, and their understanding of Aztec religion and customs. Once appointed, the Tlatoani's primary responsibility was to ensure the prosperity of the empire, a duty that extended beyond political and military decisions into religious and cultural domains. Although the Tlatoani held supreme power, his authority was far from absolute. The true power of the Aztec political system rested in a complex web of relationships, with numerous officials, military leaders, priests, and governors working in concert to maintain the balance of power and manage the empire. The Tlatoani, though the ruler of Tenochtitlan, was also one among equals in a network of powerful figures, each with significant roles and influence in different areas of governance. The position of the Tlatoani was also checked by a council of noble elites who provided input on major decisions, especially those that involved the state's military or religious obligations. Thus, the role of the king was not solely one of singular decision-making, but rather a collaboration with the nobles who represented the interests of both the elite and the subjects. The social order of the Aztec Empire was rigid, but structured in such a way as to allow individuals to rise through the ranks based on merit. Nobles, or pipiltin, and commoners, macahualtin, were the primary classes, with the distinction between the two being marked by both lineage and wealth. The nobles were often landowners or military leaders who provided political and military leadership. They, in turn, controlled the administration of the empire's conquered territories, collecting tributes and taxes from local populations, ensuring that the infrastructure of the empire remained intact. The lower classes, who made up the majority of the empire's population, engaged in agriculture, craftsmanship, and various forms of labor that kept the empire functioning. At the local level, the empire was divided into altepetl, city-states that were under Aztec control. These altepetl had their own leaders known as Tlatoani and were autonomous in some aspects, but were required to pay tribute and follow the overarching commands of the Tlatoani. Local rulers were often chosen from noble families or from among the most capable leaders within each altepetl. These rulers, however, were bound by the central authority of the Aztec emperor, and their main duty was to ensure that tribute, resources, and soldiers were delivered when required. In return, these local leaders could maintain some semblance of political autonomy as long as they followed the directives of the central government. This decentralized system of governance, which gave some degree of freedom to conquered city-states, was a clever tactic of the Aztecs to keep their empire vast and integrated. Avoiding the burden of direct rule over every region while still extracting resources and maintaining control. Underneath the Tlatoani was a highly organized and hierarchical system of administrative officials, each responsible for a specific aspect of the empire's management. The most important of these was the Xiuhcoatl, who was second only to the Tlatoani and was responsible for overseeing the legal system and the military. The Xiuhcoatl's role was one of judicial oversight, ensuring that the laws of the empire were followed, and also managing the relationships between the state and its subjects. This official was critical to the smooth functioning of the empire, acting as both a military leader and a chief justice. Another key figure in the Aztec political system was the Tlatoani, or governor of Tenochtitlan, responsible for managing the capital city, ensuring it ran smoothly, and reporting to the Tlatoani on matters of importance. The structure of governance also extended into specialized departments dedicated to various functions such as taxation, agriculture, military affairs, and law. These bureaucratic systems, although often overlooked in the romanticized history of the Aztecs, were incredibly advanced for their time. The use of codices, which were detailed pictorial records of taxes, trade, and tribute collection, played a pivotal role in managing these operations. Through this system, the Aztecs ensured that every tributary province was properly monitored, ensuring that they adhered to their responsibilities. Tribute was a form of tax paid by the conquered territories to the capital city of Tenochtitlan and often included goods like food, luxury items, and precious metals. The role of priests within the political organization of the Aztec Empire cannot be understated. Religion was central to every aspect of Aztec life, and the political and religious spheres were often indistinguishable. The priesthood, headed by the Tlamatcasqui, was responsible for conducting ceremonies that kept the gods satisfied and ensured the health and prosperity of the people. The priests had the power to influence the Tlatoani and the military leaders. Indeed, many decisions within the Aztec political system, such as the timing of war and tribute, were made with the advice and approval of the priests, who were seen as the intermediaries between the gods and the people. They played a critical role in ensuring that the empire's interests were aligned with divine will. The economy, though primarily agricultural, was tightly interwoven with the political structure of the empire. The centralization of resources was managed by a sophisticated bureaucracy, which collected tribute from the Altepetl and redistributed it as needed. This redistribution system helped ensure that wealth was not hoarded by any single individual or class, but instead was spread throughout the empire. While Tenochtitlan was the heart of the empire, other cities such as Texcoco and Tlacopan also played significant roles in the overall administration. Each city had its own responsibilities, but all were bound by the central authority of the Tlatoani. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Aztec political system was the combination of its military and religious roles. The dual role of leadership, both political and spiritual, meant that the Aztec rulers were not only warriors and kings, but also priests, tasked with maintaining cosmic balance. The legitimacy of the ruler's power rested on his ability to both lead the military in battle and fulfill religious duties, ensuring the proper flow of life force to the gods. This religious dimension gave the Aztec Empire an unshakable sense of unity and purpose. The empire's political organization also extended into its legal system, which was both advanced and systematic. The Aztecs had a body of laws that were designed to ensure the smooth functioning of their society. These laws dealt with everything from land ownership to criminal activities, and violators could face severe consequences, including death. However, the legal system was not only punitive, it also involved a series of courts where grievances were addressed by appointed judges, ensuring that justice was served in a systematic and organized manner. This approach to justice helped maintain order in an empire of such vast size and diversity. The political management of the empire was also aided by its extensive networks of communication, which included the use of runners and messengers who could relay messages across the vast expanse of the empire. This communication system helped facilitate the smooth running of the political machinery, allowing the Tlatoani and his officials to remain informed about the status of distant provinces. Furthermore, the Aztecs' knowledge of astronomy and timekeeping allowed them to schedule important events, including religious ceremonies, military campaigns, and tribute collection, in a highly coordinated manner. The political structure of the Aztec Empire, while complex, was fundamentally designed to ensure the survival of the empire and the continuity of its values. It was an empire built on divine power, military prowess, and an intricate system of governance that could manage an empire of millions. Despite the eventual collapse of the empire in the face of the Spanish invasion, the organizational systems they put in place remain a testament to the sophistication and depth of Aztec political thought. They created a structure that, for all its challenges, allowed them to thrive for centuries. making the Aztec Empire one of the most successful and influential civilizations in the pre-Columbian Americas. In the heart of the Aztec Empire, religion was not merely a set of beliefs or a series of sacred rituals. It was the very essence of existence itself. It was woven into the fabric of everyday life, interspersing the mundane with the divine, binding the people of the empire to forces beyond their control, yet intricately linked to their survival. The Aztecs were not only an empire of warriors and farmers, but also of priests and rituals, where every action, every war, every harvest was underscored by a spiritual purpose. In this world, the gods ruled, and their favor was vital to the survival of all that the Aztecs held dear. At the core of Aztec religion was the concept of balance. Balance between the forces of nature, between the seasons, between light and dark, between life and death. The gods, many in number and scope, embodied these forces. Each deity had a distinct role to play in maintaining this balance, and it was the Aztec people's duty to ensure the gods were kept satisfied. The gods were not distant, unreachable entities. They were present in every aspect of Aztec life, guiding and influencing events from the most personal to the grandest affairs of the state. The supreme god of the Aztecs was Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war, the patron deity of Tenochtitlan. He was the driving force behind the military conquests that expanded the Aztec Empire. Yet, Huitzilopochtli was also intimately tied to the sun, its rising and setting representing the ongoing battle between day and night. His strength and power were seen as essential to the continued existence of the world itself. Without the sun's daily rise, the earth would descend into eternal night. The Aztecs believed that Huitzilopochtli's strength was renewed through sacrifice, and the warriors of the empire were dedicated to providing him with what he needed to ensure the sun's journey across the sky. This sacred duty manifested in warfare, for the Aztecs believed that every battle fought, every enemy captured, was an offering to the sun god, a ritual in itself. But Huitzilopochtli was not alone in this divine pantheon. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, was one of the most revered gods, representing wisdom, learning, and wind. His dual nature as both serpent and bird symbolized the union of earth and sky, the coming together of opposites. Quetzalcoatl was also the god of culture, of knowledge, and the arts. His influence extended beyond the physical realm, governing the very essence of civilization. The Aztecs attributed the creation of humanity itself to Quetzalcoatl, who, according to myth, descended to the underworld to gather the bones of previous generations and create new life. He was seen as a teacher, a giver of civilization, and an essential figure in the Aztec religious system. Tlaloc, the god of rain and fertility, was another central figure in Aztec belief. The rains were essential to the agricultural cycles of the empire, and Tlaloc was viewed as the source of life and nourishment for the crops. Without his favor, the fields would dry, the people would starve, and the empire would crumble. As such, Tlaloc's rituals were of vital importance, especially during times of drought. These rituals, which often involved elaborate ceremonies and sacrifices, were designed to ensure the rains would come and the crops would flourish. It is said that when the people were in dire need of rain, they would offer sacrifices to Tlaloc, hoping to appease him and invoke his blessings. The Aztec pantheon was vast, each god and goddess representing different facets of life, death, nature, and the cosmos. There was Tezcatlipoca, the god of the night sky, hurricanes, and conflict, whose presence was felt in every battle fought by the Aztecs. His counterpart, Zipatotec, the god of spring and renewal, was invoked during the agricultural cycle. Huitzilopochtli's mother, Coatlicue, represented the earth and its raw, untamed power, the one who gave birth to life and devoured it in death. Each god, with their unique attributes, played a role in the balance that the Aztecs sought to maintain through their rituals. The role of the priesthood in the Aztec Empire cannot be overstated. The priests were not simply religious leaders, but also political figures, intellectuals, and healers. They were deeply versed in the sacred texts, the codices that contained the gods' instructions, and the prophecies that guided the empire. They were also skilled in astronomy, able to predict the movements of the stars, and in mathematics, using these skills to determine the most auspicious times for ceremonies, sacrifices, and even warfare. In a society where the sacred and the secular were deeply intertwined, the priests acted as the mediators between the divine and the earthly realms. It was they who performed the rituals that maintained the gods' favor, ensuring that the sun rose each day, that the rains fell in time for harvest, and that the empire continued to grow. The Aztecs' most famous, and for many, most shocking religious practice was their ritual of human sacrifice. Sacrifice was not viewed as an act of cruelty or barbarism. Rather, it was a deeply sacred act, a means of maintaining the cosmic balance between the divine and human worlds. The Aztecs believed that the gods had created the world through their own sacrifices, and it was through the sacrifices of humans that they could continue to nourish the gods and keep the world from descending into chaos. The ultimate sacrifice, the offering of human life, was the most potent gift one could give to the gods. The victims of sacrifice were often prisoners of war, captured during the frequent and brutal military campaigns that expanded the Aztec Empire. These captives were not seen as enemies, but as sacred offerings to the gods. Before the sacrifice, they were often treated with great reverence, given food and fine clothing, and even allowed to participate in ceremonies. The victim would then be led to the top of the great temples of Tenochtitlan, where priests would perform the sacred rites. The heart was removed, symbolizing the offering of life to the gods, and the body was often left to be consumed by the community or used in further ceremonies. While the practice of human sacrifice is what the Aztecs are perhaps most famously remembered for, it is important to recognize the depth of their religious worldview. Sacrifice was not an act of mere violence. It was a sacred and necessary part of maintaining cosmic order. The Aztecs believed that the gods had to be nourished in this way to keep the natural world in balance. Without the sacrifices, the sun would not rise, the rains would not fall, and the world would fall into darkness. This view of the cosmos was also reflected in the way the Aztecs structured their festivals. These ceremonies were grand, highly orchestrated events that were an essential part of the religious and social life of the empire. The most important of these was the Tenochtitlan festival, which honored Tezcatlipoca and marked the renewal of life. During this festival, the people would gather in massive numbers, and a young man chosen for his beauty and strength would be selected to represent Tezcatlipoca. He would live as a god for the duration of the festival, receiving gifts, admiration, and feasts. At the end of the festival, he would be sacrificed in a ritual that symbolized the renewal of the world. Other major festivals revolved around the agricultural calendar, with offerings to gods like Tlaloc, to ensure the fertility of the earth and the success of the harvest. These festivals were times of both reverence and joy, where the community came together in shared purpose. But beyond the larger communal ceremonies, daily life in the Aztec Empire was also filled with smaller personal rituals, offering food to the gods, invoking the gods' favor in matters of health and family, or seeking divine guidance in times of uncertainty. The Aztec belief system was one that deeply permeated every aspect of life, ensuring that nothing was done without considering the divine order. Whether in times of war, agriculture, or celebration, the Aztecs viewed every act as a way to sustain and honor the gods. Their rituals and sacrifices were not just religious observances, they were the means by which the world itself was kept in motion. Each life taken, each offering made, was an investment in the very survival of the cosmos. In the Aztec Empire, religion and rituals were not abstract concepts. They were the very forces that gave life meaning. From the high priests at the top of the social hierarchy to the common people who offered their prayers and sacrifices, every individual played a role in maintaining the cosmic balance. Their gods were not distant or indifferent. They were active participants in the world, and it was through their devotion that the Aztecs believed the world could continue to exist. The religion of the Aztec Empire. with its complex pantheon, rituals, and sacrifices, was not only a reflection of their spiritual beliefs, but also a driving force behind the empire's power, unity, and enduring legacy. In the vast expanse of Mesoamerica, where the gods were believed to walk among men and the heavens shaped the fate of empires, one leader emerged whose reign would alter the course of the Aztec Empire forever. His name was Moctezuma II, a figure whose ascension to power heralded both an era of magnificence and a path toward catastrophe. His rule marked a transition from an empire grounded in conquest and expansion to one that sought consolidation, sophistication, and ultimate fragility. The profound reforms he enacted, while aimed at strengthening the empire, would also lay the groundwork for the empire's eventual downfall. Moctezuma II, born around 1466, was not only a man of royal blood, but one who was raised in the highly disciplined traditions of the Aztec priesthood. His upbringing was a blend of religious rigor and political education, preparing him to take on the dual role of both the spiritual leader and secular ruler of the Aztec people. This fusion of roles was reflective of the broader Aztec worldview, where the ruler, or Huitlahuacanni, was seen as the earthly representative of the gods. It was this divine right that shaped his leadership and decisions throughout his reign. The story of Moctezuma II's rise to power is one marked by a fierce combination of ambition, diplomacy, and a calculated mastery of Aztec traditions. He ascended the throne in 1502 after the death of his uncle, Ahuitzotl, under circumstances that were not entirely transparent, but were in keeping with the highly competitive nature of Aztec succession. The death of Ahuitzotl, a well-respected ruler who had expanded the empire to its peak, created a vacuum of power that Moctezuma skillfully maneuvered to fill. As his reign began, he faced an empire that, while powerful, was also struggling under the weight of its own expansion. The empire was vast, sprawling across diverse regions, and governing such an immense territory posed new challenges. Moctezuma's reign would, in many ways, represent a shift from the belligerent, expansionist policies of his predecessors to a more centralized and bureaucratic empire. While his predecessors built the empire through military conquest, Moctezuma sought to strengthen the empire from within by reforming its administrative and religious systems. These reforms, though seemingly aimed at creating greater cohesion and stability, also exposed the fragility of the empire's foundations. One of Moctezuma's first major reforms was the establishment of a more organized and efficient system of tribute collection. The Aztec Empire was founded upon a complex web of tributary relationships, and it was the collection of tribute from conquered peoples that fueled the empire's wealth. However, under the weight of continual expansion, the tribute system had become disjointed and at times unreliable. Moctezuma worked tirelessly to centralize the tribute system, ensuring that each province's tribute obligations were more strictly adhered to and documented. He established new administrative units and departments tasked with overseeing the collection of tribute, and he placed the most loyal and skilled members of the noble class at the helm of these institutions. While this reform was intended to streamline the empire's finances and ensure its continued wealth, it also created a deeper stratification within the society. The nobility became more entrenched in power, while the lower classes, already subject to the demands of warfare and labor, felt the full force of Moctezuma's taxation system. His focus on centralized control and the extraction of tribute made the empire more efficient, but it also alienated many of the people who were the backbone of the empire's economy. At the heart of Moctezuma's reforms was his desire to solidify his divine status. The Aztec rulers were more than mere monarchs. They were seen as intermediaries between the gods and humanity. Moctezuma's strong religious training led him to believe that the very fate of the empire was tied to the whims of the gods, and that it was his sacred duty to maintain their favor. Under his rule, the religious ceremonies of the empire reached new heights of sophistication. Moctezuma ensured that the great temples of Tenochtitlan, particularly the Templo Mayor, were constantly adorned and maintained to reflect the immense power of the Aztec gods. He enacted reforms within the priesthood, bringing greater control under the central authority of the emperor himself, and solidified his position as both a ruler and a priest. Perhaps the most ambitious of his reforms was his overhaul of the military system. While military conquest had been the lifeblood of the Aztec Empire, Moctezuma saw the need to establish a more cohesive, disciplined military force that could defend the empire's vast borders and suppress any internal dissent. He expanded the Quaupili, or noble warriors, and instituted new training programs for both warriors and commanders. He also strengthened the military's ties to the state, ensuring that the empire's most powerful warriors were also those most loyal to him. The military reforms Moctezuma initiated helped to solidify his power, but they also contributed to the militarization of Aztec society, where the warrior class became more and more influential in the empire's political structure. In addition to his military and administrative reforms, Moctezuma's reign is often remembered for its cultural flourishes. Under his leadership, Tenochtitlan became a true cultural hub, a city of unrivaled grandeur. The capital city was not only a political and military center, but also a center of art, science, and religion. The creation of vast public works, the construction of impressive temples, and the expansion of marketplaces all demonstrated Moctezuma's vision for the future of his people. Yet, as the city flourished, so too did the distance between the emperor and the people he ruled. Tenochtitlan, in all its splendor, became a symbol of Moctezuma's disconnectedness from the struggles of his subjects. The empire's growing wealth and power were felt most acutely in the capital, while those in the outlying provinces saw less benefit from the centralization of power. However, Moctezuma's grand vision would ultimately be undermined by the very policies he had put in place. The emperor's concentration of power, while strengthening his position, created a brittle framework that could not withstand the unforeseen arrival of the Spanish conquistadors in 1519. The centralized tribute system, which Moctezuma had so carefully constructed, left the empire vulnerable to disruption. The nobility, who had benefited from Moctezuma's reforms, now found themselves in conflict with the emperor's growing reliance on a professional military and priesthood. In short, Moctezuma's reforms, while making the Aztec Empire more organized and prosperous in the short term, failed to provide the flexibility needed to adapt to external challenges. Moctezuma's belief in his divine right to rule, combined with his strong religious convictions, led him to a critical misstep upon the arrival of the Spanish. It is said that he believed the Spanish to be the return of the god Quetzalcoatl, whose return was prophesied to coincide with the year 1519. Whether he saw the Spanish as a divine challenge or simply as part of a broader celestial order, Moctezuma's reaction to their arrival was one of cautious submission. His failure to confront the invaders with decisive force, combined with his reluctance to trust his advisors, played a crucial role in the downfall of the Aztec Empire. Though Moctezuma's reign was marked by profound reforms, his ultimate failure to address the growing threat of the Spanish invaders is a stark reminder of the limits of even the most powerful rulers. His reforms, which sought to centralize power and consolidate the empire, were well-intentioned but ultimately left the Aztec Empire ill-prepared for the challenges that would arise from beyond its borders. Moctezuma's vision of a centralized, cohesive empire while achieving short-term stability and prosperity was not enough to protect the empire from the forces that would eventually lead to its downfall. The legacy of his reign, therefore, is one of paradox, an empire that reached its zenith under his leadership, but whose very strength became its vulnerability. The rise of Moctezuma the Sau was a moment of peak power, but it was also a harbinger of the forces that would ultimately bring down the empire he had so carefully crafted. The arrival of the Spanish in Mesoamerica marked not only the beginning of the end for the Aztec Empire, but also the dawn of a new era in world history, one that would forever change the landscape of the Americas and the global balance of power. Led by the ambitious and ruthless conquistador Hernán Cortés, the Spanish invasion was not simply a military campaign. It was a collision of two worlds, one that had been flourishing for centuries, and another that, though technologically more advanced, was driven by the promises of gold, glory, and an insatiable lust for power. In 1519, when Cortés and his fleet of 11 ships made landfall on the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula, neither he nor the indigenous peoples could have known the profound and irreversible impact this moment would have on the future of the Americas. The arrival of the Spanish marked the culmination of years of exploration, the culmination of European curiosity and ambition, which had long stretched across the Atlantic in search of new territories and trade routes. Cortés, a former law student turned soldier, had found his calling as a key figure in the Spanish colonial aspirations in the Caribbean. Yet little did he know that his venture into Mexico would rewrite the history of the Americas and change the destiny of the Aztec Empire forever. At first glance, the Spanish appeared to be no match for the mighty Aztec Empire. The Aztecs, with their sophisticated military and social structure, their vast cities and monumental architecture, were among the most advanced societies in the world at that time. Their capital, Tenochtitlan, was a marvel of engineering. Situated on an island in Lake Texcoco, with causeways linking it to the mainland, the city boasted magnificent temples, markets, and a complex system of governance and tribute. But the arrival of Cortés and his relatively small force of around 600 men would unleash forces the Aztecs could not have anticipated, forces driven by both military technology and psychological warfare, aided by betrayal, misunderstanding, and divine omens. Cortés' first steps on the Mexican coast set in motion a series of events that would forever alter the course of Aztec history. Initially, he made contact with the local Maya, who, like many other indigenous groups, had already suffered from earlier Spanish incursions. With a mix of diplomacy and coercion, Cortés began building alliances with various indigenous groups who had long been oppressed by the Aztecs, particularly the Tlaxcalans, a fierce warrior people who had successfully resisted Aztec domination. These alliances, forged through promises of shared spoils and the lure of liberating themselves from the yoke of the Aztec Empire, would prove pivotal to Cortés' success. Despite the alliances Cortés made, his first major encounter with the Aztecs was filled with uncertainty and wonder. The Spanish were not just intruders. They were seen as strange, godlike beings by many of the Aztecs, owing to their advanced technology and horses, which had no precedent in the New World. But it was not just their physical presence that stirred the Aztecs. It was the belief in an ancient prophecy that foretold the return of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god. This prophecy, which was rooted in Aztec religious beliefs, stated that the god would return from the east in the year 1519. When the Spanish appeared on the horizon, some Aztecs, including Moctezuma Tecu, believed that Cortés and his men were the fulfillment of this prophecy, heralding the return of their deity. This belief in the divine nature of the Spanish played a crucial role in the interactions between Cortés and Moctezuma. Instead of immediately waging war, Moctezuma chose to send gifts to the Spanish and welcome them into the capital of Tenochtitlan, hoping to appease them and secure their favor. This moment of grace, however, was misunderstood. Cortés, emboldened by his alliances with the indigenous peoples and eager to seize the wealth of the Aztec Empire, saw this not as a gesture of peace, but as a sign of weakness. The Aztec emperor, in his moment of hesitation, had inadvertently paved the way for the Spanish to take control of his empire. When Cortés and his men entered Tenochtitlan on November 8, 1519, the city was a spectacle of grandeur. It was unlike anything the Spanish had ever seen, vast, thriving, and magnificent. But as they entered the heart of the Aztec world, their perception of it was tainted by greed and ambition. Cortés was quick to assess the weaknesses of the Aztec Empire, particularly its internal divisions and the resentment many subject peoples held toward their rulers. However, his actions were not without consequence. The arrival of the Spanish disrupted the delicate balance of power in Tenochtitlan, leading to confusion and suspicion among the Aztecs. Moctezuma, caught between his religious convictions and his political instincts, was rendered indecisive. Tensions escalated as Cortés and his men took Moctezuma captive, effectively rendering him a puppet emperor. This act of treachery would prove to be one of the most significant turning points in the conquest. Cortés, with the support of his indigenous allies, began consolidating his control over the city. The Spanish, who had arrived as guests, were now in control, using their newfound power to manipulate and incite dissent within the city. But Moctezuma's captivity and the Spanish occupation would not go unchallenged. Soon, a rebellion erupted as the Aztecs, led by a growing resistance movement, sought to reclaim their city and their sovereignty. As tensions mounted, the situation took a deadly turn. On the night of June 30th, 1520, the Spanish were ambushed by the Aztec forces in what became known as the Noche Triste, or the Night of Sorrows. During this ill-fated retreat, the Spanish suffered devastating losses, with hundreds of soldiers and allies killed. The Spanish, weighed down by the treasures they had looted, fled the city under fire from the Aztecs, leaving behind many of their wounded and ill. Yet, this humiliating defeat did not mark the end of Cortez's ambitions. He would return, stronger and more determined, aided by thousands of indigenous warriors, many of whom had been persuaded to join his cause by promises of riches and vengeance against the Aztecs. The siege of Tenochtitlan began in earnest in the spring of 1521. Cortez, with his newfound indigenous allies, launched a relentless assault on the capital. The Aztecs, despite their fierce resistance, were outmatched. The Spanish had access to firearms, horses, and steel weaponry, technologies the Aztecs had never encountered. But it was not just military technology that sealed the Aztec fate. It was also the devastating effect of European diseases such as smallpox, which had been inadvertently introduced by the Spanish. These diseases ravaged the Aztec population, killing thousands, including many of the warriors who had once been the backbone of their resistance. As the siege dragged on, the once great city of Tenochtitlan was systematically destroyed. The Spanish and their indigenous allies destroyed the temples, palaces, and markets, leaving the city in ruins. The Aztecs, already weakened by disease and famine, could not hold their ground against the relentless assault. On August 13, 1521, after months of siege and suffering, the Aztec capital finally fell. Moctezuma had died earlier in the conflict under mysterious circumstances, and his successor, Cuitlahuac, was also soon to succumb to smallpox. The fall of Tenochtitlan marked the official collapse of the Aztec Empire and the beginning of a new colonial era in Mexico. The Spanish conquest of the Aztec Empire was not a simple military victory. It was the result of complex alliances, misunderstandings, religious beliefs, and technological advantages. The conquest left a lasting legacy, not only in terms of the destruction of one of the most sophisticated civilizations in the Americas, but also in the profound changes it brought to the region. The Aztecs, once rulers of an empire that stretched across much of Mesoamerica, were now subjugated by a small group of foreign invaders. Their culture, religion, and way of life were forever altered as Spanish colonialism took hold. The Spanish conquest, with all its brutality and tragedy, is a story of empire, conquest, and the clash of civilizations. It is a reminder of the fragility of even the most powerful empires and the irreversible impact of foreign invasion on indigenous cultures. The Aztec Empire, in its grandeur, was not immune to the forces of history, and the Spanish conquest became a pivotal moment in the shaping of the modern world. The legacy of the Aztec Empire, though marked by its brutal conquest and eventual fall, reverberates through time, shaping the culture, language, and identity of modern Mexico and other regions of Mesoamerica. The Aztecs were more than just conquerors and builders. They were artists, thinkers, engineers, and agricultural innovators, whose influence has endured long after their empire crumbled. Their legacy is one of extraordinary resilience, cultural richness, and tragic destruction, leaving an indelible mark on both the indigenous and global landscape. Before the arrival of the Spanish, the Aztec Empire was at its height, dominating much of central Mesoamerica. It was a society that balanced complex religious practices with a highly organized political and military system, thriving in the harsh conditions of the Valley of Mexico. Their advanced knowledge of astronomy, engineering, and agriculture allowed them to harness the resources of the land in ways that many other civilizations could not. Tenochtitlan, their capital, was a wonder of the ancient world, a city built on a lake with a series of artificial islands, impressive causeways, and a sophisticated water management system that helped the city flourish despite its location on an island. Yet, despite their accomplishments, the Aztecs were not able to withstand the tides of history, and their empire fell within a generation. While the Spanish conquest irrevocably altered the trajectory of Aztec civilization, it did not wipe out their influence. Far from it. The aftermath of the conquest left a unique cultural fusion, a blending of Spanish colonial rule with the enduring traditions of the Aztecs and other indigenous cultures. This fusion formed the foundation of modern Mexican identity, with elements of Aztec culture woven into the fabric of the nation's cultural, religious, and political life. Despite the efforts of the Spanish to suppress indigenous practices and impose European customs, the Aztec legacy has survived in numerous ways, even thriving in some contexts. One of the most profound aspects of Aztec legacy lies in their enduring contributions to language. Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs, continues to be spoken by millions of people in Mexico and Central America, and many words from Nahuatl have entered the global lexicon, especially in the fields of food, flora, and fauna. Words like chocolate, tomato, avocado, coyote, and mezcal are all derived from Nahuatl, reflecting the Aztecs' profound connection to the natural world. These linguistic contributions are a testament to the vibrancy of Aztec culture and the survival of their language against the forces of colonization and cultural erasure. Beyond language, the Aztec influence extends to their arts and architecture, which continue to captivate people today. Aztec art, renowned for its intricate detail, symbolic complexity, and use of vibrant colors, has inspired generations of artists. The magnificent stone carvings, featherwork, and pottery of the Aztecs were not only functional, but also carried deep cultural and spiritual significance. Their works often depicted gods, ceremonies, and cosmological beliefs, offering a window into the soul of Aztec civilization. These artistic traditions have lived on through modern Mexican craftsmanship and folk art, which often combine indigenous styles with European influences, creating a unique and vibrant artistic identity. The architectural wonders of the Aztecs, especially those found in Tenochtitlan, continue to influence the way we think about urban design. The city's structure, with its use of canals, causeways, and intricate city planning, was a marvel of engineering. The Aztecs' ability to build a thriving metropolis in the middle of a lake was an achievement that demonstrated their ingenuity and foresight. Though the destruction of Tenochtitlan by the Spanish left behind little of the original city, the principles of Aztec urban planning have had a lasting influence on how cities in the region are designed, particularly in relation to the use of water and the integration of natural features into urban landscapes. Perhaps one of the most significant contributions of the Aztecs is their agricultural innovations. The Chinampa system, a form of raised field agriculture, allowed the Aztecs to maximize their land use and produce abundant crops, despite the limited arable land around Tenochtitlan. The Chinampas were a complex network of artificial islands created by weaving reeds and mud from the lakebed to create fertile plots of land, which were then used to grow a wide variety of crops, including maize, beans, squash, and other vegetables. This agricultural system allowed the Aztecs to feed a growing population and thrive in a challenging environment. Today, chinampas are still used in some regions of Mexico, a testament to the lasting practicality of this ancient system. Furthermore, the Aztecs' agricultural knowledge extended to the domestication of plants and animals, including the cultivation of maize as a staple crop, which remains a cornerstone of Mexican cuisine and culture. Their understanding of the ecological balance and the seasons, as well as their reverence for the natural world, has influenced modern environmental thinking, particularly in relation to sustainable agriculture and resource management. The Aztecs were also skilled in medicine and public health, with an advanced understanding of anatomy, herbal medicine, and surgery. Their medical practices, though not as well documented as their other contributions, are evidenced by the vast array of medicinal plants and treatments they used. They were among the first to recognize the importance of cleanliness and hygiene in maintaining public health, with baths and cleanliness being an integral part of Aztec society. This respect for health and well-being continued through colonial times and can be seen in the persistence of traditional healing practices in many indigenous communities in Mexico and Central America. Religion and spirituality, the lifeblood of the Aztec Empire, also left a significant imprint on the culture of Mexico. The Aztecs worshipped a pantheon of gods and goddesses, each of whom governed different aspects of the world and human existence. Their religious practices, while often viewed through the lens of European colonialism as savage or barbaric, were rooted in a deep understanding of the cosmos, time, and the cycles of nature. The Aztec calendar, one of the most advanced of its time, was based on the movement of celestial bodies and the agricultural cycle, emphasizing the interdependence of human life and the universe. Despite the brutal destruction of their temples and shrines by the Spanish, elements of Aztec spirituality survived, often intertwined with Catholic practices in a syncretic blend of belief systems. The Virgin of Guadalupe, one of the most significant symbols of Mexican identity, is an example of this blending, as her image was embraced by indigenous peoples and linked to the earlier worship of the goddess Tonantzin. This synthesis of old and new, of Aztec and European influences, reflects the resilience of indigenous spiritual practices in the face of colonial oppression. The Aztec worldview, which emphasized the cyclical nature of life and the central role of sacrifice in maintaining cosmic order, has continued to resonate in the cultural and religious life of modern Mexico. Festivals, dances, and rituals that draw on ancient Aztec traditions continue to be celebrated today, as communities honor their ancestral roots and affirm their connection to a rich and complex cultural history. In the realm of politics and governance, the Aztecs left behind a legacy of centralized power and complex bureaucratic systems that influenced the development of modern political structures in Mexico. The Aztec Empire was ruled by a king, the Tlatoani, who held both political and religious authority, a model of governance that would have lasting effects on the political organization of colonial and post-colonial Mexico. The organization of tribute collection, military service, and the management of conquered territories provided a blueprint for the Spanish colonial administration and shaped the development of modern governance in the region. While the Spanish conquest led to the end of the Aztec Empire, it also marked the beginning of a new chapter in history. The cultural fusion that resulted from the interaction between the Spanish and the Aztecs gave rise to a new, hybrid culture, one that reflected both the violence of colonization and the persistence of indigenous traditions. Over the centuries, the Aztec legacy has been revitalized by successive generations who have reclaimed their heritage and fought for the recognition of their cultural rights. The resurgence of indigenous pride and the recognition of Aztec contributions to modern society have been central to the ongoing struggle for social justice and equality in Mexico and beyond. The Aztec Empire may have fallen, but its legacy endures. It lives on in the language, art, agriculture, religion, and governance of the modern world. The spirit of the Aztecs, their ingenuity, resilience, and connection to the land, continues to inspire and shape the cultural and political landscape of Mexico and the greater Mesoamerican region. The legacy of this extraordinary civilization is a testament to the enduring power of human creativity, endurance, and the desire to understand the world around us. As we look back on the rise and fall of the Aztec Empire, we are left with a complex tapestry of history, culture, and legacy that continues to reverberate through time. The Aztecs were a civilization of unmatched complexity and ambition, one that, in many ways, laid the foundation for the world we know today. Despite their violent conquest by the Spanish, the remnants of their culture, their knowledge, and their influence have endured, often hidden beneath layers of colonialism, oppression, and time. The Aztec Empire was a manifestation of the human drive to organize, to build, and to understand the world through a lens that blended the spiritual and the material. Their political organization was advanced, their military prowess unmatched, and their agricultural innovations paved the way for sustainable practices still in use today. But more than these achievements, it was the Aztec worldview, their understanding of the interconnectedness of life, death, and the cosmos, that left an indelible mark on Mesoamerican history. They were not merely conquerors. They were visionaries who saw the world as a complex, cyclical system in which human beings played an essential, albeit transient, role. Their spiritual and philosophical principles, though challenged and suppressed by foreign forces, have been passed down through generations, morphing into a rich cultural heritage that continues to define the heart of Mexico. The events that unfolded after the arrival of the Spanish, the violent destruction of Tenochtitlan, and the eventual collapse of the Aztec Empire serve as a stark reminder of the fragility of civilizations. However, the Aztec spirit has not been extinguished. Instead, it has been reinterpreted, preserved, and woven into the fabric of modern life in ways that are not always immediately apparent, but are felt in the everyday experiences of millions of people. The Aztec calendar, their gods and their rituals, their language and their arts, remain embedded in the national consciousness of Mexico and other parts of the Americas. The resilience of their culture, like the resilience of the people who survived their conquest, is a testament to the enduring power of indigenous traditions and beliefs. It is easy to think of the Aztecs through the lens of tragedy, a powerful empire torn apart by a foreign invader. But such a perspective overlooks the profound contributions they made to the world. It is in the study of their agricultural methods, the innovations they introduced in the fields of astronomy and engineering, the arts that have inspired generations, and the systems of governance that shape the structure of Mesoamerica that we begin to understand the true scope of their impact. They left behind a legacy that transcends time, and their story, though marked by tragedy, is ultimately one of human ingenuity, perseverance, and cultural richness. The destruction of the Aztec Empire, though a cataclysmic event in history, was not the end of their influence. The blending of Spanish and Aztec cultures after the conquest produced a new identity, one that, over centuries, would evolve into the modern Mexican identity we recognize today. From the arts to religion, from language to agriculture, the fusion of these two worlds created something new, something distinctly Mexican. It is this fusion that has shaped the country's unique culture and its people's resilience in the face of adversity. The legacy of the Aztec Empire continues to live on in the vibrant traditions, customs, and beliefs that are celebrated to this day, and it is this spirit of survival and adaptation that defines the Aztec legacy. In the years following the conquest, indigenous communities fought to preserve their culture, their language, and their heritage. The struggle was not easy. Colonial rule sought to erase indigenous traditions, imposing foreign norms and attempting to eradicate the very things that made the Aztecs unique. Yet, despite centuries of oppression, indigenous identity persisted, adapted, and flourished. The resurgence of indigenous pride in recent decades, the reclamation of Aztec symbols, and the revival of Nahuatl and other indigenous languages are proof that the spirit of the Aztec people, far from being vanquished, has been reborn in the modern world. This reawakening of cultural consciousness is a powerful reminder that no civilization, no matter how mighty or how tragic its fall, is ever truly lost. The story of the Aztecs is not just the story of an empire, it is the story of a people's connection to the land, to the heavens, and to each other. It is the story of a culture that valued knowledge, creativity, and the natural world. And while their empire may have been destroyed, the principles that guided their civilization, the belief in the importance of balance, the reverence for the sacred, and the drive to understand the mysteries of the universe live on in the hearts of millions. As we continue to reflect on the legacy of the Aztecs, it is important to remember that their story is not merely a chapter in a history book, but a living part of our collective human heritage. Their lessons, their accomplishments, and their struggles continue to offer valuable insights into the human condition, insights that remind us of the beauty of our shared history and the need to honor and learn from the past. In recognizing the enduring influence of the Aztecs, We also affirm the resilience of all cultures, all peoples, and all civilizations that, like the Aztecs, have left their mark on the world. The Aztec Empire may have fallen, but its legacy is alive and well, carrying with it the spirit of a people who once ruled the Valley of Mexico and whose influence continues to shape the world in ways both seen and unseen.